Coming up on Influencing Entrepreneurs.
This coach said, well, why can't this be your calling? And I said, what do you mean? He says, you are getting hundreds and thousands of people jobs every day. You're changing lives. Why can't that be the focus? And it was like, that's when the light bulb went on and went, oh, maybe it can be what we do.
Right.
So the focus became at that point on really raising great leaders in the business to continue to do our calling, which was to get people jobs, to continue to spread that.
After years of teaching entrepreneurship and consulting with multiple companies, I realized that when business leaders share stories of not only their successes, but their mistakes, it had a huge impact in the classroom. So I thought, why not document those stories? On this episode of Influencing Entrepreneurs, we'll hear from Tana Greene. Tana is an award-winning business owner, author, and speaker. At 17, she vowed to own her own business by the time she was 30. She spent the next 12 years defining what that business was going to be, but her purpose was clear. She wanted to help others by finding them employment. I'm Cassmer Ward, and this is Influencing Entrepreneurs. I do want to hear all about your story, but kind of like looking through your notes and everything, I've noticed that you're a member of the Women's President Organization and a board member for Safe Alliance.
Was until I had to come off for 12 years, yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
I served my time.
Can you tell me a little bit about those organizations?
Sure. So Women Presidents Organization was started by a woman out of New York who found that there weren't places for entrepreneurs that had reached a certain level of success with their revenues and to get together. So she formed this, and you had to be doing at least $1 million in revenues in order to be a member of this. And then they started breaking them out in $10 million groups, $50 million groups, and they get together 4 times a year and act as an advisory board.
Okay.
So I'm one of the founding members of that.
Wow.
2 years ago. And it has been one of the reasons for my success, just really being able to connect with these other women. And they drive you because like they come in and they're doing 50 million, you're only doing 30, and you're like, oh gosh, I got to get to that 50 mark.
Right.
I can't let them outdo me. So there's a lot of competition in the group, but a lot of support.
Excellent.
So that's been fantastic. And Safe Alliance is around domestic violence.
Oh, okay.
And because of my story and my past, having survived domestic violence, I wanted to give back. So I became their spokesperson during the time that we raised $10 million to build the new shelter here in Charlotte.
Okay.
And raised, we did that during 2009. The worst economic possible time to raise $10 million, but it was so needed in Charlotte. Right. And we were able to build a new facility for women that are finding themselves in a domestic violence situation.
Well, a lot of organizations come out of such kind of trauma or traumatic events. And you mentioned your story regarding that. I don't know, we don't have to talk about that? Or?
Oh, no, absolutely. It's all part of the story.
So. Okay. So we can talk about that because one of the things that I love that it starts off is at 17 years old, you said, I want to own a business by I'm 30, but how do these stories come together?
Well, the whole backstory for me is my father was a military officer and my mother was a stay-at-home mom, and it was in the 60s, and we're living in Chesapeake, Virginia, and the perfect brick ranch home with the 3 bedrooms. You know, I have the 2-year-old older brother. I'm on the honor society. I enter high school. And what does any girl want in high school but to have the boyfriend, right? So
not a boyfriend, the boyfriend. Yeah.
And I got lucky and got Mr. Popular, who
okay.
was a senior. Well, by the time the summer between my 9th and 10th grade, I was pregnant. I was 15 years old. So coming from a Christian family that was all about love and support, they said, what do you want to do? We said, we want to get married. Next thing you know, I'm walking down the aisle in a white dress at 15. Had my son
and you
at
really
16.
You're trying to do the right thing.
Right.
I mean,
it was the right thing to do. We thought we were in love. I thought I was in love.
Yeah. And at that age, it feels like no other.
Right. And I thought he was so caring because it was, you can't ride the bus, it's dangerous. And I don't want you hanging around those people. I didn't know that these were signs of control because nobody had ever named that for me.
Right.
So I thought he loved me and was just protecting me.
Right.
And then as I got into the marriage and into the house, the control began to get worse and worse and became physical. So here I am at a school, 9th grade education, with a baby, and he goes off to work and takes the phone with him. That was when you had the rotary dial phone, right? unplug it and take it because I'm not allowed to talk or see anyone when he's not there. So it progressively got worse.
And you're no longer in school at all?
No, I didn't go back to school because that was not allowed. So I kept it from everybody. I didn't tell anybody what was going on because I was going to fix it. Because women, we fix everything.
Right. But when you say they don't know what's going on, do they not know you had a child?
Oh no, they know I have a child. They come to visit, and I act like everything's fine, but behind the scenes, it's terrible. So there was a point in time where we were going on a date. My parents were going to babysit. He came home late from work, had been drinking. We got in the car. I was crying because I'd been spent all day getting ready to go out. I mean, what 17-year-old? What do they want, right? They want to go be with their friends, and so did the whole. You didn't have curling irons then, and you didn't have so you had to put these big curlers on top of your head and wear them all day to get straight hair. Yeah. So I'd done this all day long. Got ready. He comes home late. We get in the car because I want to still go out. We get to my parents' house. He takes the carrier out with the 8-month-old. He gets out, beats me up, and drives off. I had to go to the door. Right. Well, that was the first time my parents realized what was really. They knew something wasn't right, but they didn't know it was like this.
And just a side note, at this point, is this the first time it's physical, or is this the first time anybody finds out?
It's the first time anybody's found out. So my mother was very wise and said, "You need to talk to somebody." It didn't have a name back then. This was 1975. Yeah. There wasn't a thing called domestic violence. Right. So she called a counselor at the YWCA and said, "Can you spend some time with my daughter?" Right. In the meantime, my father went looking for him. Didn't find him, thank goodness. Right. But that honestly, that's at that point in time, that's all we knew. Right. That's all we knew. So this person spent a week with me and said, at the end of a week, they said, "There's nothing wrong with you. This is the situation you're in." And they named it, and they were able to give me all of the, the cycles and the what happened and what's in his brain and all this. And they said, "You have to choose whether you want to be a survivor or a victim."
At 17 years old.
At 17.
Yeah.
And a 9th grade education.
Right.
And they said, "You need to go home and just write down goals that are important to you. What do you want to accomplish out of life?" And I wish I had that piece of paper because I wrote 4 goals on that piece of paper. One was I wanted to finish school. I didn't want to GED. I wanted the cap and gown. I wanted to do the whole thing the right way. So I did finish school, and I went to business school because I didn't have 4 years with a child taken care of. I think my child support was $15 a week. So I was like, and I was living with my parents.
I was going to say, are you moving back in with your parents?
I'm in with my parents. So I finished school. I got a great job. It turned into a commission job. And my second goal was to own my own home by the time I was 25. Well, I was buying my first home at 22. Okay. So check off the second box.
And this is in the 70s at this point?
This is in 1977, 78. Okay. So then my fourth goal was to marry a knight in shining armor somewhere along this journey, which I did. Actually, yesterday was our 36th wedding anniversary. So I married him when I was 26. And the other goal was to own my own business by the time I was 30. And I opened the doors of the business I currently have at 29 years old. And so the process of setting goals and being very visual and clear wasn't the introduction to me very early on. And plus I was in survival mode. I was in heightened survival mode.
I was going to say, right now you're only surviving. I got to be honest, your knight in shining armor. Yeah. That's got to also create some challenges at that point, because at one point you thought you had a knight.
Yes.
Now you've got an education. You've got your own home. Yes. How do you approach that? Because I got to imagine it's very guarded.
Very guarded, but I was very fortunate that it was set up a blind date with somebody I really trusted and knew the family very well. So that was kind of easy, and it was not to say that 36 years is perfect. Plus, we've been in business together for 33.
Right.
So not to say that life has always been perfect, but it's making your decisions of what you want and working at it together and communicating that really got us there and got the businesses where they are today.
So you get out of this scenario. You do more than survive. You thrive.
Right.
You get to a point where at 29, you're going to start your own business. Yes. And I know at 17, you write down a goal, I want to own a business. Right. It could be a factory, it could be a hotel, just a business is a place, it's a dream.
Right.
What is that first business?
Well, what's interesting, and looking back on it, it's easy to tell this story, but during the time, I don't know that I really knew what was happening, but it was like listening to the universe. It was like things that you encounter, things that happen to you, they all happen for a reason. We may not understand why now, but they all happen for a reason. And I think that my job that I got that was paying so much money was an admissions counselor or career counselor at a college.
Okay.
So the college I went to, business school, hired me back. So I started helping other people find a way to get educated that didn't go to a traditional 4-year college to get some type of skill to go on and survive and thrive. So,
and I'm sure doing that, you're probably running into people that have a similar story to you along the way.
A lot of them, or a lot of them just couldn't afford it, or a lot of them weren't in households that talked about college.
Well, even if it's not that exact story, it's a story that revolves around the same themes and struggle and survival. Yes.
And so what I found in that was helping people. What I liked the most about that was seeing them get the job at the end. So I said, I want to go into a business that helps people get jobs.
Right.
And that's how MyWorkChoice got started.
It's very rewarding at that point. Are you thinking of so starting a business and just doing what you love, are you seeing the dollars and cents in it, or are you just more about the passion at that point?
It was all about the passion. It was about earning a living and using the passion at that point.
Okay.
So my husband and I bought a franchise, a staffing company franchise. So I came home from work one day and said, hey, this is what I want to do, and read this article, this company's franchising. And he was in the nuclear industry. He was a scientist. He's like, okay, sounds good.
Right.
We ran the numbers and we're like, oh, this is great. This is something we can sink our teeth into, because it's, it's a professional, it's Monday through Friday. You don't have a lot of inventory. You can grow a business that can grow and grow and grow. So it had all the components of a good business model that you could sell someday. So going into that business, we started with the franchise. The franchise ended 15 years later, 2002. And at that point, we had to make a decision which way we were going to go, whether we were going to take it out on our own or sell it back to the franchisor. At that time, the franchisor had gone public, had brought in a new CEO, and it was very obvious that he did not care for franchisees and didn't care to even buy them back, just wanted to take their business and move them out of the way. And this was we realized this around February of 2000. And we started watching it closely, and we had raised a manager to become the person that would go with the sell, because we're thinking we're going to sell it back and go do our calling. So that's another whole part of it.
I got to hear about this calling.
Yes.
So we're going to get right back to that in a moment.
Yes. So we're talking about calling, and it's like, okay, so I have to get the money from this business to go do this calling, because that's where I'm supposed to be.
So you are thinking of a clear change at this point.
I don't know what it is.
Right.
Just know that I'm supposed to be doing something.
And this franchisee or franchisor is sparking this.
Yes, because I know they're going to buy it. We're going to take the money and we're going to go. Well, about 6 months prior to the end of it, 9/11 hit. And I was in all manufacturing. Business cut in half overnight. So you're looking at this and you're saying, well, now I don't really have a whole lot to sell. And the person that we had raised to go with the sell comes and gives her notice, says she's taken a job in Atlanta and moving. Come to find out, the franchisor had hired her, moved her to Atlanta, so that at the end of the contract, they could come in and take all of the business.
Right.
So now we're complete threatened around everything we built for 15 years and had to make a lot of choices at that point. Chose to go independent. But it came across, we hired an outside coaching company to kind of come in and help us figure out, well, what's the name going to be? How are we going to grow it? What do we want out of this? What are we looking for? And that coach said, why do you feel you have this calling? What is this calling? And we dove really deep into what that meant to me. And what came out of that is that I couldn't be making money and do a calling at the same time. So somewhere along the way in my childhood, through either in the church or with my parents, money represented evil, and calling was something you didn't make money at doing.
Right.
So I never could correlate the fact that
it represents greed because what is enough.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So this coach said, well, why can't this be your calling? And I said, what do you mean? He says, you are getting hundreds and thousands of people jobs every day. You're changing lives. Why can't that be the focus? And it was like, that's when the light bulb went on and went, oh, maybe it can be what we do.
Right.
So the focus became at that point on really raising great leaders in the business to continue to do our calling, which was to get people jobs, to continue to spread that.
So you mentioned this calling and this vague general sense of finding people jobs, but really at the core of the emotion of it, what is the calling that how do you express that what you're actually doing?
Is joy comes from serving others. That's the bottom line. Is what I learned is material things didn't buy you happiness. Climbing up the ladder in awards don't bring you happiness. I think there's really 3 levels of happiness, and it really is that one is rock stardom, where, hey, I won that $10 million contract, but it doesn't last.
Right.
I got named the PTA president, but it goes away.
Right.
And then it was, I need a hobby. That was the other thing I started running toward. It was like, okay, well, I'm doing nothing but work. I need something other than that.
Yeah.
So I started oil painting, and I didn't buy small canvases. I bought them so big they didn't even fit in the SUV.
Right.
I mean, it's like I overdo everything, I guess.
It's a very common trait of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They don't do something, they don't dabble.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I got to go all the way.
Yeah.
And what I learned is once you put the glaze on it, and you donated it for auction or gave it to someone or hung it on the wall, it was done. And at the same time, that was when I got the call from Safe Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
On asking me if I would be a board member. And that came about because my best friend's daughter called and said, our class is talking about healthy relationships. She was a senior at a private school.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I know your story. And she said, I know you haven't publicly talked about it, but would you come and speak to my class?
Well,
and
then,
I said, yes.
And that's my first class. So you have this experience. You shared the story so eloquently, but I'm sure you didn't share the story for a while. So is this that clicking moment that I could really serve with this experience?
And it's so funny because you can talk about it like it just happened, but it took years for this to unfold.
Right.
And I couldn't understand when she asked me to speak, and I said yes, and then I got worried about it, and I thought, well, what if they ask me questions I can't answer about details or statistics or... So I called the hotline for domestic violence and said, can you send somebody with me to this class?
Uh-huh.
And so this woman came with me, helped me present. She said, can we have lunch? Little did I know she was the CEO of Safe Alliance at the time. And she said, I would like for you to join our board. And so all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to give back. Now, this has been, I'm close to 40 some years old now. So this has been 25 years of silence.
Right.
Mainly because I thought people would think less of me. I lived this big lie of, I never told anybody I didn't have a degree. Right. I mean, here I am, a successful businesswoman, and I don't have a degree.
Right.
Right? That's shameful. Yeah. Then it was, I got married at 15 and had a baby at 16.
Right.
That's shameful. So you hide all this because you want everybody to think you're something else. And when I became authentic, it's when my leadership soared. It's when I became more joyful. It's when I started serving.
You became vulnerable.
Yes. When you were able to let all that go and just say, hey, it is what it is, and I hope my story helps somebody. So they began to raise the money. That was right at the year they had done the study to say, hey, we only have 30 beds. We need 120 beds for Charlotte. Right. So let's find property. Let's break ground, which they decided $10 million was the number. Mm-hmm. And they said, we want to put you on the board and we want to put you on the committee to raise the money. And then all of a sudden it was, we want you to be the spokesperson. Well, when I first got up and told my story, I couldn't even get through it without just bawling.
Right.
I mean, it was like this thing that I had hidden for so long, and it started coming out.
Like a volcano.
Oh, it was like a volcano for sure. I'd stand up in front of 2,000 people and I would get to the part where I would say I'm a survivor, and it would just be a gush would come.
Well, even after that, after you tell it the first time or even the fifth time, I'm sure some demons start visiting you that
Yeah.
you thought were long gone.
Oh, absolutely.
Does that hold you back in some
No, I think it heals you.
Okay.
I think through that process you're healed by being able to face it. The more you tuck it back, the worse it gets.
Right.
When it comes forward and you talk through it, it gets better and better. And so the biggest event for me was they asked me to speak to a group called Men for Change, which was at the Panther Stadium at the time. And there was 300 men in that room. And I stood up and told my story. Well, I am on the board at the chamber. I've gotten awards all over Charlotte. My business was known. And everybody just sat there and went, "What? You?" So it really became that sense of, wow, this is really helping so many other people.
Right.
So the joy came from really realizing I can do more to help people. And a lot of the people that work for us see the video. We have a little video that we put out, that the story's there, and in hopes that it helps them. I mean, we have 18,000 employees around the country. So, and hopefully to be 20,000 and 25,000 over the next year.
So your business, it helps people find jobs. I don't know if the best way it would say staffing or recruiting or whatnot.
I would say that this journey to my ultimate goal is to empower the working world.
Right.
That's a big statement, right? But you break that down and we look at the hourly workers that we help. So we're talking manufacturing, distribution, we're talking large companies that use 1,000 contingent workers on top of their 6,000 that are full-time, right?
Right.
So these are large numbers of people that are working in picking, packing, forklift, manufacturing, hourly workers. May not have education, they're working as hard as they can, that's their living. That's the majority of our working population are in hourly jobs. And I wanted to give them something they'd never had before, and that was to empower them. So MyWorkChoice came about 5 years ago. We looked at the statistics of the staffing industry, of the light industrial staffing industry, and turnover was 433% per year. Absenteeism ran at 30 to 33% per day. And we said, this model doesn't work anymore. This doesn't serve the client, nor does it serve the people. So we went to our largest client and said, we'd like to take absenteeism off the table. They said, what do you mean? We said, stop dinging them for absenteeism. You're losing your best players because it's the 3 strikes you're out rule.
Right.
Why not let them self-schedule what they want to work, what shift they want to work, and let's track that for a while.
First time you said that, how well does that go over?
Well, they said, have you lost your mind? Right. And they said, okay, we'll give you one small department of 400 people to test it on.
Right.
So we were just using an off-the-shelf technology scheduler at that point, and we gave them their choice to pick their own shifts. Well, we started getting 90, 95, 98% show rate on every shift. We realized after about 6 months, we hadn't billed 1 hour of overtime. This was big.
Right.
And we hadn't turned over but 5% of the population. And they weren't turnover. They just couldn't use it at the time.
Were you expecting these types of results?
No. We were expecting good results, but not that good. So we said, we're on to something here. Talk about empowering the working world, giving empowerment to a workforce that's never had it.
Right.
Why do you think so many people flock to Uber?
Right.
It's independence. Yeah. I can live my life and work at the same time. Right. So they run out, they drive cars with people throwing up in the back seat, and it's the greatest job on the planet, right? So what we did was we took a model like that and turned it into a true W-2 employee with benefits that work for these companies. And it's just, through the pandemic, it's been phenomenal when you think about the women in the workforce, and the majority have left the workforce. Right. I think the statistics like 2.5 million have left the workforce for women. For the month of September, every unemployment claim was by a woman.
Wow.
So and then our population is about 56% women. Well, now they can take an app and say, I can work first shift on Monday because I have my mother. I can work third shift on Wednesday because my husband's at home that night, and I can work Saturday shift. Well, who lets you do that?
Right.
So it has proven to be just an unbelievable tool for empowerment to these hourly workers.
How about educating the employers? Because I'm sure that it's harder to get them on board than it is the workforce.
Actually, that's been a very easy part, believe it or not, because the old model was failing so bad. They were getting 50% show rate from a traditional staffing company. Right. And then what we learned was that one of the clients said, well, can we use your app as a SaaS product? Can we put our people on it? And I said, well, what would you want to do that for? Yeah. I'm thinking, why do they want to use my app, right? They said, well, we have 33% absenteeism too. And I went, what? And I didn't think that a permanent workforce would call in that often. But the average person works 30 hours a week in those hourly jobs. And I asked a couple of them why. And they said, because I can't make it on 20 hours a week. I need the money for at least 30 hours a week to live. So they know at the point that it takes to live, and they know how many hours they can work. Some of them work 40 and want more than that every week, but the average is 30 hours a week. So when the client said that, they said, we just want it for our permanent people to be able to hit that I'm not going to be here or I'm going to be on vacation. That then feeds to the community of workers that have already been trained to take that shift. So now they have, not only do they have the show rate in the contingent side of the house, but they have it in their own permanent. So it's a constant feeder of employees that stay and work and have each other's back. It's kind of like the old waitress who says, hey, I want to go to a concert. Will you take my shift for me?
So you started off as a staffing agency. You're now this logistics company. And one of the lessons I had learned in business before is we make many mistakes. We do things we don't want to do or aren't in our core. I learned at a point that I don't take work from anyone I wouldn't do for free.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean I do it for free, but it's something that I'm passionate about to do. So your whole 30-year career is based on that sole model. Yeah. So at 17, you didn't say, I want to be in the logistics business. No. I don't want to be a SaaS,
Right.
What are some of the hardest learned lessons that got you to that point without sacrificing serving? Or at some point, did you have to sacrifice serving?
I would say I went in and out of that mode of really being clear on my purpose. I don't think you can stay focused 100% of the time.
Right.
And just to let you know about failures, successes, I've had 7 startups since I began this business within a staffing world. I've exited 2 successfully. I have 1 left. You do the math.
Yep.
So there's been failure in there.
Right.
There's been things started that didn't pan out. There's been companies that we tried to go down a path with a specific niche that did not work. And failure doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel, and you can get down into this valley with it and feel like, well, I'm just a failure. This just isn't going to work.
Is there a failure that you thought, it still baffles you? This was the one that should have worked.
Oh, yeah.
Would you share that?
Absolutely. Started a company called Blue Bloodhound and raised $10 million for that company. And we were starting to get great traction, and it was for truck drivers, and it allowed them to be an Uber driver in trucking. So if a specific transportation company needed a driver to do this run, they could post it, and then the driver could come in. So we had all their drivers' credentialing, everything is done. But it was a 1099 model, so it was an independent contractor model. And we had a lot of battles in different states in dealing with that 1099 issue. It was a brilliant idea. It still needs to be there. There's so many drivers that would love to go back on the road and drive if they could do it on their terms.
Right.
The only way they're going to do that is own the truck.
Right.
And a lot of them walked away from that. So that just seemed like the obvious thing to do, and it just couldn't get traction.
It would have been better for the employees or the truck owners, for the suppliers and everyone.
Everyone.
And regulation.
But regulations killed it. Yeah, absolutely. And so that was a hard one because it was just so clear, the picture, and I think it was just too soon. I think it will come about again, but you have to cut your losses at a certain point.
Right.
You have to say, this is not working, I'm pouring more and more money into this, and I just have to walk away.
as we kind of reflect on the trauma that really sparked all of this in that survive or thrive mentality, what's the impact that you had on someone else that you look at and you can still feel that warmness in your heart of the impact it had on them?
I think there's a lot of my employees throughout the years that I can say that about, but one in particular is now my president.
Excellent. And was it just through collaboration? Was it
through just really becoming authentic, really helping him become authentic and understanding and thriving. And I once had dinner with the CEO of a public company, and we're sitting there having dinner at this private steak restaurant in this private room, and he just starts pouring out his story to me. And it was a traumatic story. And he said, I do not know why I just said that to you. So I turned around and told him my story.
Right.
Well, he said, would you fly out to my company out in the Midwest and have a nonprofit and speak to this group of young students that I work with that are in poverty, that are in bad situations? I just want you to tell them your story. And I said, absolutely. He said, never in a million years did I think you'd really get on the plane and come and do this. Well, I did. And I get to his corporate headquarters and he says, well, before we go, we have a leadership group and I'd love for you to address them. So we walk into this stadium of a room that has like 1,000 seats in it. And they're micing me up and I'm like, I'm not prepared for this. I have no idea what I'm going to say. And I stood up and I told my story, and then he stood up and told his story. He had never told it before. That he was homeless as a kid, that he had to steal pizza. I think this was a guy with an MBA, the CEO of a public company who was a football player at one of the top colleges and had gone through that, but he'd never told his story. And he stood up and told it to his employees, everybody in that room. And just the watching him come out of that and become authentic. And my understanding is he's still speaking to this day, and that's been like 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, excellent.
Well,
thank you so much. You've really illustrated how passion and not just all dollars and cents can actually build a business, build a cause more than anything, and inspire and help other people. So thank you so much for
I've enjoyed it.
sharing today. Hey, thank you.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/NexagyEducation or visit CassmerWard.com to catch up on previous episodes. And be sure to be on the lookout for our next episode featuring Phoebe Pressler, the owner and president of Spark Publications, an award-winning independent publishing firm specializing in the design of magazines, publications, and independently published books for print, digital, and interactive media.